Welcome back to Not Alone with Melissa Sue Methvin. Before we get started, I'd love for all of us as a collective to get grounded, just to take a deep inhale through the nose and a long exhale. Let's do 2 more of those because I think I feel I need it today. Now that feels right. I just love as a collective, we get grounded before we get started today because I have a very special guest, Katie Jo. She is a friend, but more importantly, she's a global speaker, author, artist. She is a shaman and as well as a sound healer. So today will be where I feel my audience sometimes need that bridge to truly understand how sound healing is so scientific and it is also healing, and not to fear it and to understand it. I think when there's no understanding of what that is, what is drumming, what is my beautiful sound bowl here that I got from Katie from Tibet, which is over 1,000 years old, what it does for me on a cellular level. Katie has spoken globally and she has worked in hospitals. So I'm so grateful to have you here today. And also she's been on the Legacy Maker Writer's Island with me and my roommate. And I feel her voice is just soulful and deep, and her wisdom, it comes from centuries. Her wisdom is centuries years old, and I just cannot wait to share her wisdom today.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'd love to start off. I mean, your story has some depth to it and has definitely some highs and lows that many don't even know how they'd come back from the loss of a child, from dealing with suicide yourself, to abuse. So I'd love to start from just getting to know you and what you've gone through, what you've gone through in your lifetime that brought you to learning these tools that are life-saving and vital for us.
I'm so glad. I'm thankful to be here. What a treat it was to be in the British Virgin Islands with you, to be able to be roomies, and then just to be able to support you with your gifts and talents throughout the last week, because we've been on both seasons together, but to be able to support you living your purpose and your wisdom and your gifts through breath work and yoga, and to witness that, and for you to share your guidance as well as on the podcast. And it was so reciprocal. So I'm honored to be here today. And you and I are both writing books. I have published 8 books, and I'm writing my 9th, which will be the one featured on Writer's Island. And I know that you're a published author too. And this book, unlike all my other books, most of my other books are training, are concepts, are philosophical. Is that the right word? Either way, this one
sounded good.
Yeah, this one is memoir style, and it shares my life story and how my life story became the faith transition for me, leaving and moving through and shifting out of quite a conservative community upbringing religiously. And some of you are familiar with what is often called the Mormons, but the true name of that is considered the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is a very immersive religion. It's not a weekend religion. It's a complete lifestyle. And contrary to some of the more famous shows that you see right now with Mormon wives out there, to be immersed in the actual religion is full scope every single day of the week. So that was my foundation. And as I went through my life, I never felt like I fit in. And I've always been a questioning person. I've always been somebody who wants to know all sides of the story, who wants to know other perspectives. But most of my life in childhood, I just felt like I didn't belong and always felt like the odd duck. Now, I had a wonderful family, and I'm grateful for that foundation of that structured religion because it gave me the discipline of daily practice of spirituality. And so today in my 40s, it looks a little different, but the foundation was set for me, which was daily connection to the divine. Prayer, scripture study, service, Sunday service was the cornerstones of my life. And while I still live all of those principles, ethics, and values, they're not necessarily in a structured spiritual form or religion now. So I feel like that sense of not belonging and also the cultural and societal pressures from not just the community, but also in Western media to be perfect, to look perfect. I developed a severe eating disorder. And to maintain that in my teenage years, I was taking diet pills and laxatives. And at the final crescendo of doing that, I was taking between 90 to 120 a day. And ultimately, in that headspace and that extreme polarity of just self-hatred, I ended up attempting suicide and I overdosed. I was hospitalized for 10 days. And when I look back on that, and all of this is in the book, I'm grateful that that happened. I'm grateful that that occurred because that 10 days was enough for me to detox and I never went back to pills again. I still struggled with an eating disorder for the next few decades, 2 decades, but I was free of the pill addiction. I became a pregnant teenager, like you would, it's almost like you could check the boxes. Of course she would if she was in that headspace, looking for love, looking for somewhere that I felt that I was desired. And I had my daughter and changed my life. I went back to my religious roots. I wanted to give her the concept that God is omnipotent, loving, unconditional. I didn't want to teach her any dogma. I didn't want to teach her that there was measures and you have to be this and do this and follow these rules. I just wanted her to know there was something out there, that she was loved. And I also wanted her to be welcomed by the community. Fast forward a few years and I had a beautiful second son. And in Utah culture, I was 22, 23 when my son Jonah was born. We have the kids young. And he came in as this beautiful bright light with blonde hair and blue eyes and just walked really young and early. And he had this life and vitality and curiosity and awe and was always excited and always exploring. And I was 5 months pregnant with my third child when Jonah came down sick about 10 p.m. at night, and he passed away at 9 a.m. in the morning. And we had the 911 call, and we had the ambulance ride. And it was severely traumatic. I still get emotional remembering and speaking about it. And that, I feel like, was the breaking open for me. I guess I'll share this part. I think this is important. We were in the waiting room, not the public waiting room, but they have family rooms that you wait. And we had just followed the ambulance there, and we were waiting with my husband and my mother-in-law, and we were waiting to see what was happening. And when the doctor came in, I remember him not looking up, and he said, "He's gone." And in that moment, I separated from my body, and I was looking down at the room, And I remember seeing my mother-in-law, and I actually, in that space, I didn't know she was my mother-in-law. I saw the mother-in-law, the woman, weeping, and I saw my husband fall to the floor and curl into fetal position and just cry. But what caught my attention was the woman, which I didn't know was myself, who was sitting in the chair, and she was writhing and screaming like a wounded animal. And it was completely incoherent. And in that place of not being in my body and looking at the room, I remember there was a being of light next to me, and I didn't look at them. I didn't turn. I just knew there was a being with me. And I said to the being, pointing at the woman, I said, "She's making a ruckus." And the being said to me, "That's okay, she can. Her baby just died." And then my mother-in-law, who was in the chair, weeping, she cried and she said, "No, no, this wasn't supposed to happen." And the being to my right said to me, "Yes, this was always the plan." And when they said that, I re-entered into my body like a splash of cold water, and it was just the most intense, extreme pain of my life. I felt like every shred of me that had ever been woven together to heal was completely torn apart again. And everything that I thought about life in the terms of life making sense was just obliterated. And so here I was, 5 months pregnant, and my daughter, oldest daughter, who was 4 at the time, she was so traumatized, she became a mute for about a year and wouldn't talk. And it was devastating, and anyone who's gone through loss, as I know you have, it reconfigures everything in your life. Absolutely everything. And it's as if it's as if like somebody's thrown the marbles all over the floor, and now you've got to put them back in the bag. But you're picking up every single one of these, and this is our beliefs and what's important to me and what's not important to me, and how does life work and how does life not work. And it's almost like as you're collecting those and trying to organize it again, you're picking up every single marble and you're examining it from all angles and saying, what are you? What is this? And then you're placing it back in the bag and you're not sure again. And so that's my experience. I know everybody has their own personal journey, but that was what it felt like to me. And in that reframing, I was still practicing my religion. I was still very actively pious. But I began to have a different awareness. When I would go to church, people would say things like, "He's in a better place," or you know that this is how the afterlife works, and this is where your son is, and don't worry this. And there was this flicker of a flame that began to be ignited inside of me that was asking the question and burning bright, how do you know? Because all of these comforting things, and if you've gone through grief, people really have the best intentions, but sometimes they say things that are really, really, really not comforting and sometimes inappropriate. And I have to separate into their intention versus the delivery. But through that, in the LDS faith, you are not supposed to drink coffee or tea. And I had like a morning coffee. And an elderly woman in the faith said to me, "You will never see your son again unless you stop drinking coffee." And I remember it hitting me like a dagger in the heart, just stunning me. But it was something looking back that was really, really, really powerful, because that was emotionally impactful enough for me to say, how could that possibly be true? Throughout all the time in all of the world and all of the souls and all of the mothers whose children have passed, how could it possibly be true that a God would not let her be with her child after death because of coffee? because of anything. Family bonds to me exist beyond that. So I guess that I had something inside of me that said there's no way that if that's the way it works, that's the God I'm part of. And so I was still living, and I still, for the most part, live the spiritual faith I was given, which is pretty prudent, I guess you would say. I advocate substance free. I'm still a coffee drinker, but I still have a really disciplined spiritual practice. I'm still very engaged in service. So, but at that point, I started to unravel and started to take the steps of taking every belief that came my way, every scripture that came my way, every leader that said this is how spirituality, God, life works. Instead of taking it at face value, I began to look at it individually for me and say, is this true and is this not true for me? Does this feel like it fits for me and the way I want to live and what I want to believe? Spirituality, heaven, whatever that is. And so that was really this domino effect where I started to just find ways that made sense to me. And a lot of that is not just prayer, but being in nature and not praying necessarily to a he, a God, the him, because I don't know that God is him. I don't know that God is her. I just know that there's something there. And so now I just explore and interact with whatever that is in the way that feels really true for me, because if I don't know, I won't assume. So when I pray, I'll say creator, I'll say omnipotent, I'll say you who are known by 1,000 names but are the nameless one, because I know something's there and I know that it's intimately involved in my life, but I don't know what it is. And that I still read scriptures, I still read sacred texts because I want to know, and I want to know what other people's perspectives are. But I'll always leave that on the shelf and say, but what do I feel? Because I can integrate that or not. So that's what was going on for a while, for a decade or so. And I was finding that through my grief, supporting, serving, doing volunteer work helped me navigate grief because it kept me focused on something other than myself. It gave me an avenue for love to express. It gave me a place where I could see people going through very hard times. And I know for myself, when I had lost my son Jonah, there were people that showed up in kindness and grace that were lights in that dark time. And so I feel honored to be somebody that will step in for other people who are in those pivotal crossroads of their lives. And so I was doing that. And I was doing that as a volunteer freelance photographer at cancer retreats. But as you said, I'm an artist. I've always painted and sketched. I've had art shows and was even featured in a college art show when I was in college. And somebody had seen one of my paintings and they said, "Can you paint that on a drum?" And I'd never touched a drum in my life. And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'll try." And in my paradigm, the drums were just a musical instrument. But I saw that the people who used them thought they were spiritual tools. And out of respect for their beliefs, before I would paint, I would drum. Before I would paint the drum, I would pray. And I would just ask for guidance to paint what they asked me to paint. So all of a sudden, my life really morphed into doing painting commissions on drums. And I had done maybe, I don't know, hundreds. I might be exaggerating. I don't know how many I'd done because I've done hundreds now. But all these people had drums. They said, "Well, can't we do a drum circle?" And I was like, "Sure, let's get together."
I love how those little doors, these little
Yeah.
angels guiding you along to where your divine purpose was, truly. I love
Yeah.
that, those little seeds. And I have to share, I brought my drum that you painted even before I even met you.
I
You know,
know.
this is so wild how life works. But yeah, it was August 2023, I believe,
Oh
that
my
Kira had
gosh.
shown her drum, and I was like, I need the lady's number. And so it's
Yes.
so beautiful. It's encompass exactly what I wanted.
Well, I'm grateful.
But I,
And I mean, what happened, I guess, to kind of go towards where the sound healing goes is at these cancer retreats. One night I said, "Can I bring a drum up?" Because I started to have this impression you need to bring your drum because I had a drum by then. You need to bring your drums. And I thought that's weird. I just go take photos. Take photos on the last day of the retreat in Park City, Utah. But I texted the retreat manager. I said, "I know this is weird, but do you mind if I bring a drum up? It talks about coming to the heart." And she's like, "That would be fun." So I ended up bringing my drum. And I just was like, you could, and it had this beautiful dragonfly printed or painted on it. And when I pulled it out, one of the ladies in the group started to just cry and just break down. And I couldn't understand. I just pulled the drum out of the bag. And what I didn't know is this woman was in stage 4 cancer, and her husband had just passed from cancer, and they had kids at home. And so she was facing the possibility of leaving her children as orphans and then grieving the loss of her spouse. And on the airplane over to Utah in the middle of winter, she had said a prayer, and she said, "Husband, if I see a dragonfly this weekend, I know I'm not alone."
oh wow, got full goosebumps you saying that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so here it is, like the last day of the retreat. She hadn't seen one, which you really wouldn't in Park City, Utah in the middle of winter. And I showed up with a drum and a dragonfly painted on it. So it was really poignant and powerful. And I drummed over the ladies, and I was just teaching. This is opening the heart. All of a sudden, the retreat manager said, "Bring your drum every time." I said, "Okay." So I'd bring the drum every time, and I'd bring a few spares, and we would drum. What took me into sound healing was I started to get messages from the patients, and they would say, "Hey, after we drummed, my blood counts were different. Why?" And I was like, "I have no idea." I mean, I was just trying to offer the spiritual concept of drumming brings us to the heart. And the reactions and the feedback that I was getting was so consistent of pain management, of my brain fog was gone. It usually takes me this long to rebound from chemo, and instead it only took me a shorter time. And I thought, what is happening here? So I started to wonder and ultimately research, is there science behind this? Is this real? And what I now have and teach and train is there are hundreds of medical and scientific studies that show sound is being used on the physical body. And we know this because there's things that we see and witness but don't necessarily interpret as sound healing. We see doctors put tuning forks on patients to find broken bones. We know of ultrasounds where they're using sound waves to look for things inside of our body. We've heard of, I don't know what it's called, but when people have kidney stones, they'll actually use sound waves to break those up. So it's actually in modern medicine everywhere. But when you come to something with an antique singing bowl or a leather drum, people think it's woo-woo.
Yes.
So it's still in a lot of ways an up and coming modality, but the foundational principles are being studied and are valid. So that's how I ended up in the sound healing. And all of a sudden I was doing drum circles all of the time, monthly. What started with 3 or 4 people ended up being on average 150 to 200 people a month for roughly 7-8 years, when the World Parliament of Religions came to Utah, and I had applied to be a volunteer, literally to sweep floors and carry bags. literally, but they do background checks. And I was really excited to go and just volunteer because Marianne Williamson was going to be there, Jane Goodall, Malika Chopra, Malcolm X's daughter. Her name's escaping me right now. There's Madam Maya Tiwari, who's the founder or known for the Ayurvedic medicine. Like, so these huge world names were there. And I was going to go sweep floors if that's what they needed me for, because it was in Utah. And somehow, through some act of miracle, my friend calls me 2 weeks before, because I had been applied 8 months before. She calls me 2 weeks before and she says, Katie, and she's a New York Times bestselling author, and she was speaking on the circuit. And she says to me, hey, why didn't you tell me you're the keynote? And I was like, huh? What? And here I'd like put my volunteer and my background in so that I could get into it because security was so high, and just say, this is who I am and what I do. For whatever reason, through however the powers that be, it put me on as keynote speaker for the women's part of that entire World Parliament of Religion, broadcast to 10,000 people live and 100 nations.
Wow. Incredible.
So like it's in my book, like I'm standing backstage with Marianne Williamson. And I'm sitting there like, how did this happen? And my sweet friend who had called me, it was kind of funny. She's like, do you not check your emails? I was like, well, I didn't even know, because I hadn't even paid attention. I just knew I was going to be there and I was going to sweep floors. So that opened up a lot of opportunities for me. I started to get called onto a lot of stages. I started to get invited to share the message. And all I share when it comes to the drum is everybody drums. Whatever your heritage, whatever your history, drums are in every culture, on every continent, in every country of the world. And so the drum to me is a symbol of unity, where everybody deserves to be heard. There's no beginning and no end, because we stand in a circle. There's no first or last. There's no better than, worse than. Every drum has the right to play, and I have the right to play my drum and be heard, but so do you. And I can't beat my drum and yours at the same time. So it is up to me to be accountable for myself, and you be accountable for yours. And I might choose to have a song that's fast, and you might want a rhythm that's slow, but there is always a way to harmonize and come together in cohesive unity, or, uni means one. So universe, verse means song. There's always one song we can come together. And that's the message I share when it comes to the drum. And I believe that. I believe that we live in a world of polarity, and there's a lot of division happening with religion, with politics, with other things in the world. And why I teach and share about the drum from a speaking standpoint is that we can all stay true to ourselves and find a way to work together and come together. Let's do it. So that's my message and mission with the drumming. And I guess that's where, my book kind of takes you through all of that. So there's some other things in the book, I know time-wise, that are pretty strong, about a boyfriend I started dating and ended up in some domestic violence situations. And then, some pretty in-depth subjects of getting through that. And so that's a quick but not so quick summary.
Yeah, and what's the title of this book, this new book?
It's called Sovereign Soul.
Sovereign Soul. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I have right here, you've had 8, so I have Pathway of Sage, and it's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and I'm excited for this new book as well, because I think you have a powerful story to where you're at now, and what, because I think when people are at that breaking point, it's so overwhelming, and it does get confusing as to why is this all happening to me, and all this pain, and how do I move through it, and how to utilize some of these tools as far as still your spiritual practice. I know, is that kind of a non-negotiable for you as far as your spiritual practice on a daily basis and connecting with the divine, God, and as
Yeah.
far as using sound as well for people, like how they can start incorporating sound? I know for me, like you said, the drum is for the heart, and I have actually, they'll probably take a video of it, but I have the kids here. Let me go grab it because I want to show it here. So the kids
Oh,
you had
yeah.
recommended, with my kids were dealing with a lot of anger, losing their father, and a lot of grief, and these outbursts, and a lot just overwhelm was just all too much. And you said, well, let them paint their own drums, maybe something that reminds them about dad. So actually I did that for Father's Day, and I said, let's paint your drum, and whenever you're missing dad, whenever you're feeling big emotions, you can drum your drum. So anyways, they had, for anyone that can see it here, they had, my late husband Scott Methman, he loved fishing and did an annual trip in Alaska. We lived in Alaska on this boat, Crazy Ray, it was what it was called. And that's what they decided, both of them, to paint that as dad's favorite boat, favorite thing to do. And I think that was very meditative for Scott, to fish and be out in nature, very grounding for him. And so I love that idea, because I think to incorporate sound with my kids, I think that they really gravitate to that. They really do. I have the steel drum. I sometimes have young kids, like 4-year-olds, and my girlfriend's kids come, and they love the rain shaker, and how it could be so calming, the sound bowl. And they really gravitate towards sound, and because it's playful too, adds playfulness to it. And I think for our children nowadays to recalibrate their nervous system, it's really hard. We live in a very fast-paced world. They're in school all day, then we got sports, and we're running around. So they don't have time to really spend, on their nervous system. So I find having these sounds, these sound bowls, all these instruments in a sacred space in my house, they can always gravitate to and use that. And I know I had taken your class on Writer's Island about drumming and sound and the sound bowl, and how it is, on a cellular level. You had this picture. I love this picture that shows the cells, how they change after you played, certain music and instruments, and being also mindful what you listen to, probably, right?
Absolutely. Sound waves. So sound waves are frequency, and the type of frequency there is hertz, which is a specific sound wave. And so we all have heard, 444 hertz or things like that. So, but frequency is frequency. And until roughly the industrial age, the sounds and the frequencies that the human body was exposed to was organic. Bird calls, animal sounds, humans. There was not a lot of synthesized frequencies inundating the human body. Now, organic sound is a mathematical pattern that's known as the Fibonacci, and that would be a whole hour teaching here, but it's the scientific study that shows that all of organic nature follows a mathematic pattern, and that includes sound waves that are organic. So when we started to introduce sound waves, for example, right now there are frequencies that are making this video possible that are coming through the ethers. If wherever somebody's listening to this, they might have an air conditioner or a heater running. They might hear traffic somewhere. They might hear their refrigerator humming. These are non-organic sounds that are on mathematical sequences that are not matching the biology that is inherent to us. So wherever you are, whatever you do, eating clean, parasite cleanses, everything that is so beneficial for people to do. we are still being inundated by silent sound because humans can only hear so many sounds. We have a very narrow scope. I mean, if you think of dogs or bats and many other animals, whales and dolphins, their ability to hear and convey sound and express it is so much farther than we can. But that doesn't mean we're not being affected by it. So when you have these sound tools like the singing bowls, like the drums, like music that's calibrated to certain hertz that match our DNA, then you are helping to retune your body. So I can't claim to be a musician. I do play a few instruments, but I'm not a musician. And what I've learned from musicians is, let's say that we left a violin or a guitar or even a piano sitting for a long extended period of time, they would go out of tune. They need to be retuned by an expert for simply sitting there. Our bodies are similar, but we're also getting inundated by a wide variety of frequencies that are not beneficial to the biological frequencies that are inherent to us, that are the mathematics that are inherent to us. So when we use specific sounds, it helps to reattune our body to those mathematical patterns that are the most beneficial for health. And I know that's, I hope not too deep, but not too surface. It's just to help people understand. And the study that you were referring to with the photographs is by a gentleman named, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I've read his work, but I've never heard his name pronounced. It's Fabian Mamon. And he showed cells, specifically cancer cells, and how they reacted being exposed to sounds from a variety of instruments. And my favorite one is the gong, because they showed a cancer cell, and they showed after 19 minutes of being exposed to the gong, which is this very gentle, not loud, just very gentle gonging. In 19 minutes, the cell membrane of that cancer cell destabilized, and simultaneously healthy cells rejuvenated. So I personally have worked on clients that come to me over the last 15 years now, and they will give me feedback on things like their blood count numbers. And I remember this one gentleman, he came to me to experience a singing bowl session. And when I use singing bowls, I use the antique ones. I don't use crystal, and I'm not against crystal, just so everyone's clear. I just have found better results with the metal. And so I had my yeah. And the crystal's beneficial too. I don't want to, because there's a lot of people out there using them. I have them just typically on session treatment, one-on-one treatment. I'm using the metal. I've just seen better results with those personally. And he came over, I think, on a Saturday because he was having such poor reaction to chemo, and he was making him so sick that he said, I don't want to do this. But his cancer had been so advanced that the doctors were saying, you can't even take a week off. But he said, but I can't live like this. And he was just having severe, digestive, a lot of the stuff that happens. So he said, I just need a week to break. But he didn't want to do nothing. So he was actually pretty by the book, and this was really far out for him to come to me. So he came on a Saturday, and we used the gongs and the singing bowls on him, and he went to the doctor on Monday, and his numbers were better on his blood count that Monday than they were with chemo for week by week. And so they were like, wow. And they had expected him to just tank. So I've seen this multiple times. And cancer's one thing, and I really hesitate to make any claims with cancer. I'm not a doctor. I can only tell you my experiences. What I have witnessed multiple times is people who have had strokes and have lost movement in their face or in their leg or a part of their body. The sound waves that are not musical the brain has to kind of figure out what's going on, because the brain is conditioned to follow certain musical patterns because we're exposed to it. So when we're playing a sound bowl or something that the brain goes, hold on, that's not following a pattern that I recognize, it actually lights up neural pathways that don't always stay in the game. They're just taking naps. They can work, but they're like, well, we're not needed. Why bother? And I've seen at least 4 times that people have regained sensation in parts of their body that they had no sensation.
So
And
helping almost like rewiring the brain.
yeah,
Rewiring
and I
some
feel like
things.
that's what was happening is their
There's
brains
some
were just
blockage almost in the meridians, if I understand, trying to
mhm,
understand. Because
mhm.
I actually, did a solo session with you on the island because I remember
Yeah.
after I did breath work, a lot of times I do really well at clearing myself and in that energy and praying and protecting my own energy, but I hadn't done it at the end where I kind of recalibrate myself and whatnot because I could just take on a lot of people's emotions while they release during breath work.
Mhm.
So I remember going, okay, can I please have a session with you? And that was the first time. And I took a picture, but I had all of these bowls kind of on me. You had them placed, on my stomach, I think legs and just all over. And just to kind of explain how that worked, I remember the sound would change because you would play them and you'd say, okay, take some deep breaths in and help that energy or that flow that was blocked to kind of
Mhm.
move through me, in those, for me, that makes sense. Meridian lines, we learn that in the mouth and how it's all interconnected. So there was a blockage somewhere and you're like, can you hear it? It was almost out of tune on one
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the more you work the sound and the more with breath, the more it kind of it realigned.
Yeah.
It tuned, we heard a different sound out of the bowls. I found that so
I
fascinating.
and I love to do that and to show that because as you know, now I teach and train sound treatment and people are worried that they have to be, because like when you train kind of what's considered energy work or kind of alternative health modalities, a lot of people get nervous that I'm not intuitive enough or I'm not going to know. And I'm like, just listen to the sound. The sound will change based on what's happening in the body. And so for people who haven't experienced it or haven't seen it, when I'll use sound bowls or tuning forks or what some of the other tools that I use, when we're working from, crown to toes or, head to toes, you don't have to put pieces and instruments on the body. You can just be in the field because the sound waves move past. But what you can see and hear is the sound will change. And so I'll take a bowl and I'll kind of go over the whole body, and where the bowl will literally change the sound, we know that the energy is not moving as smoothly as other places. And so by the end of the session, when we take that bowl or other instrument from above the head to below the toes and we move through, it'll stay a consistent song. And then we know that the energy's moving in a balanced way. And I feel like the body itself, when everything's moving in a balanced way, can heal itself.
Can heal itself. Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely read many books, that they talk about how we can heal ourselves, ultimately is more going within, doing this kind of work. We can heal ourselves but we have to believe in the practice as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And be
Yeah.
open-minded to it. So it's such a powerful practice. And I think for me as well, when it came to mental health and grief and all that and navigating all that, I got so curious, like you, well, okay, well, what are other people doing? So I was willing to, test it all out and see if it kind of works.
Yeah.
And I've seen tremendous amount. I feel like almost every day I need an attunement of some sort, either if it's through breath or humming or the sound, movement,
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, our environment that we live in, we don't live in a bubble. We don't live out in nature, unfortunately, and whatnot on a daily basis. So I do feel having a practice like this to recalibrate, even, in dental world, I talk about the sonos, like all the
Mhm.
sounds, the drills, all of that, you get sensory overload. And I think of how many
Yes.
practices that you hear, that people that work in hospitals, the constant noises there, we get sensory overloaded. So having a practice where, you know, you learn to use sound, you learn to use breath, you learn to these nervous system, this movement, nature, you know, grounding is so
Mhm.
vital for survival. And especially if you're going through grief, going through dark times, you know, just really spending more time with, for me, you know, God, the divine, whatever you like you said, you know, building that bridge. I don't want to put everyone in a box like, oh, you must follow like me. You know, I go to
Right.
a Christian church and my kids are in Christian school, but it's building that bridge that we're trying to do. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
I really do want that bridge to be where people come with compassion. That circle that you talked about is like, can we just
Yeah.
come in a circle and utilize ancient wisdom for healing,
Mhm.
and really rooted in just understanding and compassion, and how you pray is perfect for you and what resonates for you, and the way I pray, it resonates for me, and there's no right and wrong in all of that. And I think and maybe go into, you know, what is shamanism, you know, because a lot of people don't
Mm.
know, and maybe have almost like a, you know, their own stigma behind it and what that
Mm.
is. And I'd love for you to explain that.
Well, I'll admit too, I think that there is a stigma about it, and I think that the stigma's fair. I really do. Because there's been a lot that has happened in shamanism, and there's a lot of people that are saying they're doing shamanic work. There's a lot of practices in shamanism that it's fair to be wary of. Just like it's fair to be wary of any organization, any spiritual practice that is run by humans. Because anytime, like to reference back to what you're saying, and maybe I'll reset. So the word shaman comes from a tribe in Siberia. And what happened is anthropologists were studying the tribe, and the word for their spiritual guide was saman. And so that's, it got morphed into shaman. And so what happened is then when anybody studied any people across the world, they used the word shaman to say, oh, this is the spiritual person. And it's not really fair to attribute that name when it's not the name for the holy person all over the world. A tribe down or a people down in South America, that's not the word they used, but the scientists said, no, that's what you are. So I want to clarify that first and foremost, because shamanism, the word itself, is kind of a word that's been put upon many practices that just simply means it doesn't conform to a box, a known religious structure. So there's that. But shamanism is really just following nature, paying attention to everything around you, and knowing that we can learn from it. It's this understanding that there is more happening than what we can see with the human eyes, and that there's a multi-dimensional reality occurring. So everything that I would say with that would really mirror image any religion, right? It's what can I learn from this experience? What am I being taught? Shamanism is fairly defined by, if you're using the four elements: air, earth, fire, water, sometimes a fifth element, which is ether. And you're using these in a way to spiritually interact with the divine. So that's where you would start to say, okay, this is a shamanic practice. However, if you look through the scriptures, didn't Jesus use mud? Didn't Jesus walk on water? Aren't they using smoke and incense in temples to clear? So a lot of the things, if you take the lens off of this is what it is and what it's not, you see these practices that are working, that are universal, and they're being used all across the globe. Shamans currently in modern day are most well known for hallucinogenic journeys. And it used to be, when I started doing this and studying this a long time ago, 15 years ago, the hallucinogens weren't as mainstream as they are now. And so to practice shamanism wasn't automatically assumed that that's what your practice was. And what a lot of people don't know is in the scope of shamanism, that was not all shamanic or societies used that. And for the societies that did, it was a very small sliver of the practice, not the practice. It was a very small part of it. And it was very revered and practiced, sometimes no more than once every few years. So I've studied shamanism and from the top of the globe to the bottom, and the book that you showed here, Pathway of the Sage, is really accumulation of saying, here's how these people practice differently, and here's how you can do it your own way and find your own way. But my teachings are substance free, and part of that is because I have been volunteering in substance rehabilitation centers for so long, and most of the people who are in those places have already done hallucinogens. So it's not necessarily the answer for them. It's part of what they're trying to be free of. So shamanism for
Do
me,
you find that a lot of times we look outside of ourselves for our healing, and
yeah.
sometimes that's how that's introduced? We're like, well, maybe if I try this hallucination, this will save me. I'll get more clarity, this and that. But actually, because we get kind of impatient, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I find for myself, it's like, actually, no, I need to go more within, spend more time in prayer, spend more time in
Mm-hmm.
self-realization, really, which I think you do talk a lot in your book, is like really becoming self-aware, observing our old
Mm-hmm.
patterns and how
Mm-hmm.
to shed them. I know I'm feeling it this week, this full moon,
Yeah,
and you do talk
this
about
is
the
full moon.
moons. I'm like, oh, I'm shedding. I'm noticing old patterns coming back that I do. And I'm like,
Yes.
at least now I'm aware of them. You know, when in my early 20s, I had no clue. This is why I
Mm-hmm.
was doing. For example, I'm over giver. I mean, it's an abandonment, childhood abandonment, you know, and no, I love my parents. They're all a gift. It's just, you know, divorce will do that. Grief and all that. Those are abandonments, not your parents abandoned you. It's just that wound. And a lot of times for
Yeah.
me, the over givers, which I think a lot of women are, is
Yes.
to that's how we feel. Oh, I'm gonna get more love. I'm gonna be love the more I give. But that's a safety mechanism for me. It's like, oh, the more I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
give, the more like over giver, but then I lose myself in it, you know. And so
Mm-hmm.
these old patterns are kind of coming back, and it's just hitting me in the face, and I'm like, oh boy. So I have to just process that and shed it, so that, but we have to face it, right? There is, I think there was a sentence, I don't know if I put it there. Oh, this is what I love from your book here. Highlighted it. We must allow ourselves to feel, but not to be controlled by our feelings. I love that. And then negative feelings are a red flag that we are in resistance to something. So that really hit me, and it resonated for me, especially this week, because okay, I had to allow myself to feel that I am recognizing these old patterns showing up,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I had to feel
But if you
them.
don't recognize it, how can you choose different? Because
Right.
sometimes when we go through the motions of life and do what we've been taught to do, or do what we've always done, or do what society says this is the way it works, we can kind of phone it in. We can kind of get, it's like when you're driving your car, you've done it so long, like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm home. I don't even remember that ride, because we go through the motions. And so when we go through life with our healing, with our spirituality, just taking things at face value, which versus being completely present in the moment and noticing and witnessing for ourselves, and also saying, is that true for me? Do I agree with that? Then when we move into that, then we notice, hold on, I always seem to react this way when this happens. Hold on, overgiving is, or abandonment's a trigger for me, right? And it might not be a trigger for somebody else. And because we all have our own lessons we are here to learn. And the full moon, while people think it's kind of this woo-woo thing, because I have a book written on the year of the moons, the truth is that when we are in a full moon, what's happened is the moon is getting the full light from the sun. And so the way I do it, and if you can see my head, I explain this, is if my head was the earth, and here's the moon, and here's the sun, when it's a full moon, the earth isn't in the way of them, and they both have a gravitational pull. But when they're back here, we still have a level of feeling grounded because the earth's gravitational pull is keeping us down or keeping us grounded. So when we see that full moon, what's happening is you're having the gravitational pull of the sun and the gravitational pull of the moon. We witness this with the ocean tides. The soil moves up to 18 inches in places. It's being pulled by these two gravitational forces, and we are water and we are earth, and so we are also being pulled two different directions. And the brain can't go, oh, I know what this is happening. The brain and the subconscious is simply saying, why do I feel not grounded? Why do I feel being pulled in two different directions right now? So the brain will say, oh, it's trying to answer the unrest it's feeling. So the mind starts to say, oh, it's because you haven't been paying attention that this person is really not respecting you. Or, oh, you haven't been paying attention. This is what's happening or this memory or this past you haven't healed yet. And it's because the mind is bringing up things to the surface because it can't figure out why it doesn't feel centered right now. So it's woo-woo. And also, isn't it amazing that this cycle that we go through every single month, even more than once a month, gives us the opportunity to have things come up for us to look at them and say, okay, this is a pattern in my life, or this is something that I'm witnessing, or man, I thought that I was over this experience, but here it is again. So that means I have more healing to do. So it's an amazing built-in system for us to really grow and evolve.
Yeah,
So
I've
yeah,
noticed
and
this
it's full
for
moon
so
today.
many right now. And I mean, I've had plenty of guests on here that are doctors and talk about how the moon does play a role in
Yeah,
even just finding harmony in our own body when it comes to parasites. They thrive, they like birth during a full moon. So before a full moon, start doing, taking wormwood and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, he's like, why do you think there's
good to
so
know.
many more births, people that are nurses in a hospital? Oh yeah, on the full moon. And there is science behind all of it. And there are, if you know this and if you study it and understand it, you're like, okay, a full moon is coming. And if something is coming up, at least you can observe it, you can feel it, you know where it's coming from and how to move past it. You almost have to.
Well, and physically, it's pulling, like you said, with the purse, it's pulling on our water, male or female. That's partly what happens with those births. Or a lot of women their cycles will cycle with the moon because the blood in our body is our water. And so the moon is pulling the tides, but it's also pulling on the water in us. And so it's affecting the biological functions of our body. It's not bad. It's not good. It's not woo woo or not woo. It's just this is part of being on this planet. This is part of experiencing this world. And when you learn about it, like you said, then you can use that to your advantage to be in flow. So, kind of circling back to shamanism would be I am part of nature. I'm not separate than nature, and living in harmony with it and recognizing these things are influencing me. That's just part of all of it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
noticing. I like that you say that because you start noticing how nature is talking to you. One example for me, I've had experiences with animals, especially
Mhm.
past Scott's grief, where this raven literally follows my car and guides us to the first day the kids had to go back to school after their dad passed. To a hummingbird. I'm not kidding. I mean, I was asking for a sign. I'm very clear in my prayers sometimes. And I did ask, just like the lady you mentioned in the story of her praying and asking to see a dragonfly. Is that right? Yeah,
Yes.
for me, I asked a hummingbird. And as I'm walking, I'm not kidding you, the hummingbird stopped me in my tracks and came right here in my face. And it just kind of, it, it just was there telling me like a message, and now
Yeah.
now I'm observing when nature is trying to speak to me as well, and send me little
Yes.
messages, saying, okay, you're on the right path, or okay, maybe we need to look at this, so and I think that's so fascinating and so fun to get messages from your loved ones, and truly, even though physically when you lose a child, you lose somebody, you miss their physical presence,
Yes.
and but to know sometimes getting little signs from them from the spiritual world,
Yes.
that's love. The love never left.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important for people to that are grieving to be, start looking for those little signs. Maybe it's a song that your loved one loved and it's
Yeah.
all of a sudden starts playing on the radio.
Because if everything's frequency, everything is. Nikola Tesla says everything's frequency. And when you start to think of it in that way, then heaven, multi dimensions are all different frequencies. And they're all happening right now. And I mean, based on what you're saying, because I talk about the power animal realm in the book, what part of the shamanic lens, and I can't speak for all shamans, just mine, is that while in a lot of religious ways we think of spirit guides or angels, but there's also the realm that is connected to the animal spirits. And in the animal spirit realm, they're sentient, they're aware, and they are here to support this journey on earth. And so while we might look at a domesticated dog or cat or, a snake that cross our path out in nature and think that they are not as conscious as we are, in the spirit realm, they're very conscious and they're working with that realm of our highest selves, our beings, our angels, guides. We are so supported here. And so it seems kind of strange if you don't look at it through this lens, but when you understand, like our little house cat has a soul too, and that soul isn't in the mind frame necessarily of the cat that's here. It's connected to such a greater awareness and consciousness, and through that consciousness, when we're saying I need a message, I need help, of course that realm is supporting us too. And sometimes they do that through the raven showing up, the hummingbird, or I saw a black egret by my parents' house, and I have lived in this state for now almost 50 years, and I have never seen a black egret in my life, and it was outside my parents' house. And so I was like, this is not an accident. And I looked it up, and it was that message, because I tell people, like, ask yourself in your heart what the message is for you first, and then go online and just type in what's the spirit meaning of this animal. And a lot of times that's the exact message you needed. So
I've seen that for myself. And now I feel I could talk to you forever, but I know you've got to head out soon. But how can people, I know you offer a lot of classes, a lot of courses that one day I will make, because I'd love to
mhm.
dive deeper into sound healing. And but there's more to that. Now, can you share a little bit? And we can put it in the show notes too, but how people can find you, work with you.
The easiest way is to just go to my website, and if you see my name, Katie Jo Finai, it's just katiejofinai.com. So just go there, and it shows a lot of different things. I've got my books are on there, and I've got some freebies on there right now, some meditations and things, and everything that I do is listed on there, upcoming, and the new show and the new book coming, everything. So
Yeah, it's
it's been
exciting
awesome to
time.
see you again and chat again, because I just adore you.
Yeah,
I
I
feel
love
so
you too.
lucky, and I'll
Best
see you.
roommate ever. I felt we could chat forever and go deep. That's my favorite kind of conversations now.
Yeah.
And go deep. And so I appreciate your time, and please follow Katie Jo. I mean, she's got a wealth of wisdom with her 8 books, more coming. I feel like it's been pivotal for me to use the sounds and get to know more. I keep asking Katie more and more questions and get more curious. So DM her with any of your questions, follow her, and stay tuned for our episodes on Writer's Island, because they'll be
Yeah.
able to see you doing your magic. Really, your It was so beautiful to watch you work on
Oh,
so
thanks.
many of the girls and teaching, and the drumming was honestly one of my favorite part when we were dancing and we're just drumming wild
That's
and
my favorite.
in
It's always my
unity with
favorite.
women. I think when I'll host like retreats and all the things, drumming is definitely going to be part of it because that was my favorite part.
Yes, always. Well,
Well,
thank you. Thank you for
yes.
having this platform. Thank you for having this because it's changing lives and helping people heal. And I also want to acknowledge behind the scenes because I know that there's people behind the scenes that are here today making sure that you get your message and my message out. So thank you,
Ooh, yes. Oh, I got
everything.
confirmation there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It was important. I really wanted people to understand you and understand your wisdom and truly start being open to this because it could change their lives. It could heal them. Like you said, it can heal them.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
tool.
it
I mean,
is.
I feel like we heal, but we have tools that assist us.
Yes,
So,
yes, absolutely.
mhm.
Well, thank you so much and stay tuned for the episode.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.